In today's video, we're going to take a look at this RHEEM water heater. This is an 80-gallon RHEEM water heater, and I'll give the specifics on the video when we're going through this. But we're going to talk about this, and right now it's actually running, so you can actually hear how loud it is in relation to my voice. And I'm not a very loud person, I'm kind of soft-spoken, but you'll get an idea for how loud this is when it's running. Now, I've currently got this set at 120 degrees, so it's not pushing too hard to heat up this water, but it is running because somebody's taking a shower and it's needing to refill the tank and heat up that water. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. Now this is basically the RHEEM water heater that I've got. I've actually got a slightly different version. I don't have the one that has the top mount here. I recommend you get this version, not the one that I've got with the side mount. Now I'll put the link for this in the description of the video. Now I am going to try to get an affiliate link for this. So if you click the link, hopefully if I can get an affiliate link for Ferguson, then if you buy something from Ferguson based off this video, then I might get a small commission for you clicking that link. As always, if you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. It does help the channel grow. If you turn on notifications, you'll get notified about future content when it posts. And the RHEEM portal does make it kind of tough to figure out exactly what you're looking at because they've got a lot of different versions of water heaters that you can choose from. And I'm not even just talking the difference between an 80-gallon versus a 50-gallon. I'm just talking they've got a lot of different versions that you can look at. All right, so here is the portal, and we can take a look at the heat pump water heaters, and we can see that there are 6 different options here. Now, the one that I've got has the 4.07 UEF. That's pretty much the most efficient option out there. There are a couple in lesser known, lower quality, in my opinion, brands that have a little bit higher. What I typically look for in brands are either going to be the RHEEM. I've used that for most of my life. Where I live, that's kind of what everybody used was RHEEM. Around this area where I currently live, aosmith is really popular. And then there's the rinnai option, which is pretty good. And I actually really like theirs for tankless. But for the tank option, typically I look at RHEEM or aosmith. I've had better experience with RHEEM, and I've used it just more often than aosmith. I have a feeling between aosmith and RHEEM, you're getting really top quality products if you get either one of those two. But my preference has always been RHEEM. In my opinion, it just lasts a little bit longer than what you would get from an aosmith. But if we take a look at this, we'll see that there are differences between these. So you get they look kind of all the same when you're looking at them. The pictures are a little bit different when we look at these, but the names and everything are fairly similar. And what I've noticed a lot of times is you actually can't see these in a lot of your big box stores, at least not the heat pump option. They typically have your standard electric, but these are all the heat pump hybrid options. So you've got the electric element in there along with the heat pump option. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And actually, how these work too is if your heat pump ever did die, you can still fall back on the electric. It's got an electric element there. And it's kind of like your emergency when you run out of hot water or used up all the water that's in the tank. You can use the electric option to heat it up a little bit faster because heat pumps are a little bit slower to heat up. So if you didn't know that, that's probably important to know. If you've got a 50-gallon right now and you're getting ready to switch over to a heat pump, you might want to consider getting a larger gallon. That's what I did. I had a 50-gallon tank, but I thought that was a little undersized for my house. I actually thought that an 80-gallon made more sense. I've got 3 showers that people could potentially use, 4 bedrooms. That's a lot of potential kids that could be using the shower. It just made more sense to me to have an 80-gallon for the size house that I've got. We never had a problem with our natural gas water heater running out with just 50 gallons. But I didn't want to take the chance with a heat pump with only 50 gallons that we wouldn't have an issue if my daughter took a shower, the same time my wife took a shower, and then I wanted to take a shower right after that. I didn't want to be the one that was stuck with a cold shower. And we have never had that problem since we've got the 80-gallon. Now, one of the cool options I want to kind of point in on here is down here. If we take a look at this one, we can see that we've got a UEF of 3.75 to 4.07. Same thing here, but all the way to 3.75 is the max. The biggest difference is your 15 amp versus your 30 amp. So if you've got a current 15 amp dedicated circuit, you might be better off because you won't have to do anything to change the electrical if you just get a 15 amp and install that. But if you've got the extra space, the 30 amp will get you a little bit higher UEF, which is basically your energy efficiency when it comes to water heaters. And I'm going to explain this here a little bit more in depth in a few minutes. But You have the option for 15 amp or 30 amp with the RHEEM. Some of the other brands give you the same option. So aosmith has the same thing where you could do a 15 amp or 30 amp and just make it a little bit easier if you do that 15 amp dedicated circuit, but you're also a little bit less efficient when you're using that. Now let's go back to the Ferguson webpage. Now this is where I typically get a lot of my plumbing stuff. It's from Ferguson. Otherwise I go to Lowe's or Home Depot like most people, but I've got a Ferguson right next to my house. Makes it really easy for me to go over here and get things. This is where I got most of the components that I used for this installation from the big stuff. But let's go ahead and take a look at the specifications here. So if we scroll down a little bit, we can see again, it's got that 4.0 energy factor. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in just a second on why this is important. Now, at the time that I did my installation, which was about 9 months ago now, I qualified for the federal tax credit. So I will be getting that tax credit when I do my taxes here in a couple months. But as we can see down here, if we take a look at this, it's supposed to have enough hot water for 4 to 6 people or 4+ bathrooms. Now, I've actually got 4 bathrooms, but I've only got 3 that have showers. So I kind of feel like I've got enough girls in the house that it makes sense to have 80 gallons, or potentially, like I said, I've got a 4-bedroom house. Kind of made sense to me to do 80 gallons. Again, I didn't want to be the person that had a cold shower when everybody else had gone, especially since my daughter loves to take really long showers. Very likely that we would run out of hot water. And that has never happened in the time that we've owned this in the last 9 months, where somebody didn't have enough hot water to take a shower, do dishes, or do anything else. But if we keep going down here, we'll see kind of the specifics here. Again, 80 gallons. I went with the 30 amp. Could have gone with the 15, but I was really looking for that energy efficiency option. And then it's got a water connection size of a 3/4 inch. I think that's pretty standard. I think most are 3/4 inch. Now, one other thing that I really liked on this is that it's Wi-Fi enabled. So it'll actually hook up to your phone so you can kind of track everything from your phone. And I'm going to demonstrate that as part of this video also. So I'll show you what the app looks like. I typically don't spend a lot of time in there, but it is nice to have the option to go into the app and look at how things are going. So now let's talk a little bit about UEF and what does that really mean? So what does a 4.07 UEF even mean? And if you go and look at a lot of your big box stores, you're going to see that it has a UEF of less than 1. Usually 0.87, 0.93 is pretty common, especially for electric. Same for natural gas. They're pretty inefficient. And a 0.83 or 0.87 or 0.93 might seem like it's really efficient. But let's just put this in terms of energy. Let's say that you use 3,000 kilowatt hours per year for heating your water. And that's with a 0.87 UEF. Now, a 4.03, instead of 3,000 kilowatt hours per year, I'm only going to have to do roughly 650 kilowatt hours in order to heat the same amount of water. So for every 1 unit of energy that I put in there, I get 4 units of heat back. So it's incredibly efficient. So basically, another way you might want to look at this is for every $1 of electricity that you pay, a water heater at 0.87 efficiency gives you 87 cents worth of heat. The heat pump version that has a 4.07 UEF gives you a little over $4 worth of heat for every unit of energy you put into it. So 87 cents or $4, I'd much rather get $4 of heat for my energy use. So way more efficient. Now this is my old aosmith water heater. This is what I ended up replacing. And you can see that it was natural gas. We can see that the gas line comes down in here and feeds into the water heater. This was about 15 years old. Now I've only owned this house for a couple years. So most of the time that it was owned by somebody else. And what was happening when mine went bad was it was basically overflowing so much water because I didn't even have an expansion tank on this. Basically, it was just flooding the downstairs basement. And I've got a little bit of a recessed here, but it was coming out so fast that the water was actually backing up a little bit. Now, I might have had a little bit of a backup here in my main drain also. Turns out I ended up having a problem here also, but I didn't know that at the time. But we ended up having a little bit of a backup, and the water would go all the way underneath of our stairs, which is over on the right over here. So we would see this little bit of water that was coming underneath the stairs to come down into our basement. Now, the other side of this area is a finished basement. It was never that bad. It was just a little wet or damp in that area. But it was pretty clear that we needed to get this fixed, as you can see by the constant water drain coming into here. And I ended up bringing a plumber out just to check it out and see how things were doing. And they said the same thing, is essentially we needed to get this thing replaced. This was actually on my to-do list to replace this. I put in a solar system a few months before this, and the next thing I planned on doing was this water heater. I've got a few energy related projects that I try to do on my house per year. This was going to be the next one for last year, is to work on this. Now we did have to kind of accelerate the process a little bit in order to get this installed, but I started the process of getting everything in January right after the end of the year. And by April, we did the installation. And we identified the issue with a lot of water coming out of this thing around February. So I still had a little bit of time where I wanted to order all the parts and get everything together and get it installed. Now, one thing I did do right before replacing this is I actually put in this recirculating pump here. One of the problems I was running into is this is our basement, and our third floor is pretty much where all the bathrooms are at. And it would take forever for the water to get up to the bathrooms. So we turn the water on in the morning and spend 2, 3, 4 minutes waiting for the hot water to get there. Again, another indication that maybe it's time to get a replacement for this. But I put in this recirculating pump to fix that, and it really did help a lot. And I actually put this in with the new install also. So we moved this over, but this was the only part that I had done prior to this. So it's kind of a step process. I did this first, and then I actually did the pressure regulator, and I'll show a picture of that here in a little bit also. And then we did the water heater. Now here is the box that the RHEEM comes in. Again, just to kind of illustrate the size of this thing, it is several hundred pounds. And the biggest problem I had is it's pretty much just me. So getting this down into the basement was not going to be an easy thing. So I actually wanted to hire a company to do some of the installation, as well as just move it and get rid of the old one. And that turned out to be a pretty good project. Now I did get some quotes for this installation that I was not happy with, that I thought were way over the price of what it should have been. Now, as you can see here, one of the quotes was a little over $9,000 to do the installation from my local plumber. Now, I got a couple other quotes. One was as high as $10,500, and then another one was around $8,000. Kind of expensive to install a heat pump water heater. Now, there was a conversion necessary moving from natural gas over to the heat pump, but I thought this was a little bit expensive. So what I decided to do was do a lot of the work myself, get all the components and parts, and then go out for a labor-only quote. And here's essentially how it broke down. So at the end of the day, it ended up costing me around $5,722. Now, fortunately for me, I had a little bit of time to shop around, so I got a pretty good sale price on this. So $3,500 was pretty good. Right now, they're about $4,200, so the price is quite a bit higher. But $3,500 was not bad. I definitely can't complain about the price, but all in, it was about $5,700. Now, the labor-only quote that I got from a different company was $1,785. The company that gave me the $9,000 and the $10,000 quotes wouldn't agree to a labor-only quote because they wanted to warranty their installation, and they said that they wouldn't warranty it if I went with labor-only. I'm okay with the warranty from the manufacturer. I don't necessarily need to have a warranty as part of the entire process. Most of this equipment doesn't usually have a problem in the first couple of years anyway. So having the warranty from the plumber was not something I was necessarily looking for. But as you can see, I got the price down quite a bit in doing this approach. Now, this is the expansion tank I added to mine. So you can kind of take a look if this is something you're interested in, or you're trying to get an 80-gallon. This is what was necessary for an 80-gallon. So you might not need as big of an expansion tank if you're trying to get a smaller one. Now, here is the full install of how everything kind of turned out. And as you can see here, we've got our expansion tank here, and then we've got our recirculating pump here. For the most part, we went with ProPress fittings, and then there was a couple areas where I sweat the fittings. Basically, the way I look at it is before the meter, I want to make sure everything is wet because I don't want to have to worry about that. I won't have to have any issues. I can use a ProPress fitting and fix most things that I have problems with inside the house. Everything after the meter is fairly easy to maintain. So that was kind of the requirement. Is I went with sweat fittings for pretty much everything before the meter, because my meter is actually right on the other side of this. And then everything after was ProPress fittings. Now, here's a close-up of the recirculating pump. If you've never heard of a recirculating pump, all it is that you set the times that you want it to kick off, and it will basically make sure that you've got hot water in your lines. You add a crossover next to the bathroom at the highest point or the furthest point away from this recirculating pump. In my case, that's the master bathroom. So essentially under my sink, we've got a crossover so that the hot water can bleed back into the system. And in this case, we went with the Grundfos for the recirculating pump. Again, I wasn't looking for a really fancy, something that would eventually die on me recirculating pump. These are really easy to put in, and typically they don't have a lot of problems. It just runs a little bit of power, and then you just use this dial to set when you want it to go off. Now, we pretty much all take our showers in the morning, so it's pretty easy just to set one time. You don't want to have this thing running all day long. Your bill would be astronomical, plus it puts a lot of wear and tear on your pipes. So you don't want them to run like nonstop. You're not trying to do like a tankless water heater type effect. You're trying to essentially have hot water the most likely or most common times of the day that you take showers. Now, what are some other considerations you might want to know about? I can tell you that there is a lot of cold air that comes out of here when this thing is running. It really does cool down your space. So you do want to have a pretty good size open space where you can put this in there, and you wouldn't want to put it in an area where you're trying to heat it up, because it is going to cool that space down. If you've got a closet they're going to put in, you might have to vent it out correctly. In my case, because it's in an unfinished portion of my basement, there was no requirement to do any kind of venting. And I did get this inspected as part of a permit process as well. So everything was up to code as far as the installation based on my area, on what the requirements were. I'm sure there's somebody out there that will point out some sort of a code violation for where they are. For my area, this passed without any problems. But I can tell you that it does kick out quite a lot of cold air. And you could tell in the video that it isn't necessarily loud, but you wouldn't necessarily want to have it where you're going to be sleeping or where you're going to have conversations maybe in your kitchen or that kind of thing. You'd probably want to put this in either your garage or in your basement. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the app that RHEEM uses for the water heater. All right, so this is the RHEEM app, and as you can see, it's at 120 degrees. I've got the compressor running and it's enabled. And we can see that the hot water indicator shows about 3/4 of the way there. Let's go ahead and click on this so we can take a look at it. And we can see here, it's very easy to adjust the temperature. I can just drag it to whatever temperature I'm looking for if I want to. I generally just keep it at 120 degrees, which is the default for the temperature settings in this. And we can see that on the screen, it says 2/3 full. I've got my energy saver. Now I can change that if I want to. If I click on that, I can say heat pump, I can make it electric, I can switch things up. I always go with energy saver. I never have a need for anything else. Now, if we went on vacation, you could set it into vacation mode and then it wouldn't heat the water while you're gone. There's no reason to heat the water if nobody's in the house to use it. So we could just kind of turn that off or minimize or decrease the temperature if you want to. And then we see that the compressor is running. Now at the bottom of the screen, the icons are a little cut off. On the left, we've got the schedule, so I can go ahead and click that if I want to. Now I've just got it set for 120 degrees. I haven't really done much with the schedule. It's just constantly 120, but I could adjust this and then I get even more energy efficiency. So again, a very flexible app. I generally keep it at 120 degrees, even though most people take their showers in the morning. My daughter doesn't always get up with everybody else, so we want to have her to have some hot water also. And then a lot of times my wife will do exercise and then she'll take a shower maybe in the afternoon. So there are times when people in our house take showers outside of the normal hours, so it is good to have the 120 set all the time. If we go ahead and go back now, we take a look at our usage. That's the next on the bottom there. And I can see for 24 hours, we've used a little over 1 kilowatt hours. Now, in the last 12 months, and I actually haven't owned it for 12 months, we can take a look at our energy usage here, and we see that I've used 1,155 kilowatt hours. Now, because I haven't owned it long enough, I can't see the percent change from year to year, but presumably if I made some changes to how we do things, I could potentially save something. So that might be a good test for 2026, is to try changing the settings and schedule things a little bit differently. So instead of 120 nonstop, maybe we change it for the nighttime hours, or maybe we change it for certain portions of the day, so it's not quite as hot when people aren't necessarily going to use hot water. And then we take a look at our usage report, and then we can kind of see the breakdown of when we're using it, how often it's being turned on. Now this is the 24-hour. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 30-day. And we can see that at least one day there's quite the spike there. I'm not exactly sure what happened on that particular day, but we must have used a lot of hot water that particular day in order to have that much of an increase. Or it just could be an anomaly inside the data. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the previous page. And then we'll go back to the home page. And then the next button is the settings. Now it's pretty much just your Wi-Fi settings, so there's no reason for us to take a look at that information. But that's essentially all the options you've got inside of the app. Again, it's kind of nice to have that kind of information available to you. Again, I don't spend a lot of time looking at this. As a result of putting the solar on the roof, I really don't have an electric bill. So I essentially swapped my gas bill, and it's kind of hard to tell you what the difference between my gas bill is versus the electric bill. The electric bill I don't have. I don't really have any kind of an electric bill of any kind. And the gas bill is a little hard to pin down because I've made some other changes on the gas side. So it's kind of hard to see if there's actually a measurable difference by switching to an electric water heater. But I can tell you, because I don't have a bill for solar, that this was definitely the better choice for me to switch over to a heat pump. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you like this kind of content. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that I didn't answer about this water heater install, or if there's any specific questions you might have. Coming up in a future content, I am going to explain the amount of money that I've been paying for gas versus electric and kind of a comparison of everything. There's a couple other videos I want to do before I cover that. You might have seen in some of the clips where I have a geothermal system. I want to do that video before I show the cost, because that definitely played a big role in the cost difference between electric and my gas, especially when you put in the solar system that I had installed. So I want to cover all the big installation items before I explain that cost, because it'll make a lot more sense after having done the videos on the other areas that I've made improvements in. But if that kind of content is what you like seeing, make sure you turn on notifications so you get notified about content when I release it. All right, that's it for today. Until next time.